Welcome back to the webinar series. Today we'll be discussing how to scale social media teams for maximum impact. I think this is a hot topic right now. There's a lot of changes in the industry, especially considering the innovations that are happening around AI automation, as well as business innovations that are happening within the industry to do with business models. So who am I? My name is Jake Hizet. I'm the CEO and founder of Live and Breathe Limited. We've helped to scale a lot of e-commerce companies, particularly in China, with a vested interest in North American and European markets. We help launch, position, create activations, and sell for e-commerce brands. In our time, we've helped grow 300% of GMV within the first month of employing our tactics. Before that, I was the social media team leader at Oppo, managing 52 markets, and also the media VP at Alibaba, scaling projects in different markets such as Poland and Korea for AliExpress. Okay, so why does social media matter? Well, in today's day and age, social media does matter for various reasons. The three core reasons that I want to point out here are value creation. So before, people used to use social media to advertise their products. Now, people use social media to co-create value with their audience in a two-way discussion, which means the audience can get involved in things like product engineering, so that products can be tailored towards specific audiences that engage with brands on their social media channel. Brand equity, within this there's marketing strategies and digital storefronts, but what does brand equity really mean? Well, brand equity is how you position a product in the mind of the consumer. So it's what the consumer thinks about your brand, not what the brand image or the brand tries to position itself, but how the consumer sees your brand. And the third point is consumer insights. So we can test different behaviors, we can test different preferences of our audience by testing different types of social media content, different types of strategies, and seeing what creates engagement with the audience. From this, we'll be able to understand their preferences and modify our brand. So the goals of today's presentation is to understand the common challenges faced by small and large teams on social media and learn social media scaling strategies. So the current landscape of social media in business. Oh, just skip a slide there. Okay, so by 2027, social media is expected to reach $624 billion worth of market, which is huge. It's absolutely massive. The potential reach is 5.1 billion people. That's 62% of the world's population today, as of January 2024. We already know that social media is a massive e-commerce player, but it's only growing. It's growing. It will take over probably from Amazon as new apps, AR, virtual worlds, and experiences begin to take over. And as well, we know that people utilize social media for commentary on your brand so that people feel more secure when they're purchasing your products. That's been happening since 2020, but especially proliferating since COVID. Internally, when we look at social media, we can see that especially in this year, there's a pushback. People want to know how they can get return on investment in social media. It's a big topic of discussion. How do we get return on investment? But I think we have to look at what social media is. It's no longer a place where you just post content and ads will run in the background. Social media might be passive. There might be a halo effect that impacts your conversion rate. So over here we have what are the contributing factors to how and why people are concerned about if they can generate return on investment utilizing social media. And you can see here time and budget is a big part of that. Uncertainty in how to measure accurately metrics. So these are topics that we're going to discuss and try and uncover some strategies of how to better utilize social media to really know how we can create impact with this tool and this technology. So firstly, let's look at signs that your social media team needs to scale. Now, usually when I'm working in a project and we take on clients, there's several of these red flags, okay, which is a high demand for content. Quite often people are utilizing too many channels, they can't maintain it. This is a sign that you have not scaled properly because you can't manage the amount of content that's needed on that channel. Slow response times, often people aren't engaging customers in a two-way conversation. We need to be engaging customers in a two-way conversation, particularly if they have problems with their products. It's very important in e-commerce to complete that consumer journey to make sure that people feel happy. There's a big emphasis on retention within e-commerce these days as there is inflation in economies and people want to retain customers and develop a strong base so that they can continually sell to the customers, which is measured in customer lifetime value, particularly in e-commerce. Declining engagement, another sign that your social media team has not scaled properly. So engagement is a great metric to know whether people are resonating with your content, but it takes time to create quality content. It's something that has to be thought through, it has to be measured, and it has to be optimized. We have to really understand what our audiences want to see, and we also want to know what type of contents create and prompt which kind of reactions that we want to provoke from an audience. Internally, high turnover rates within a social media team. This is not a good sign. If you have a high turnover, it can create inconsistent results. It's very bad for your brand equity. And then as well, market expansion. If we're expanding into new markets, we have to ensure the team is properly scaled to be able to cope with the demands that will be placed when scaling the social media team. So let's look at the importance of scaling social media teams. And I think it's very much summarized with this sentence: doing more with less. Now, what do I mean by this? Often when I see people taking on social media, I see everybody wants to do every channel. They want a different strategy for every channel. But actually what we want to do is reduce the amount of workload with the team to make sure that the team has more agility, which is summarized in this. So this is probably one of the most important slides that you'll see today. It's a bit wordy, but let me explain to you what efficiency for me really means. Efficiency and scaling, it means innovation at lower risk. Now, how is this? So let's look at the relationship between time, measured in the cost of time to the business, and a cash utility. So if the business has little time, but has $100 of budget, it can only scale to 100. If we have a good, well-scaled team that can manage the workflow and have time to innovate, then we can reduce we can increase the amount of time within that business, and we'll probably have a higher cash flow. So even at a lower budget, we can increase the output, we can increase the growth within the business at time cost. So the growth, effective scaling, is equal to making sure that there is enough time, there's less time cost to the business, and that you have enough cash as leverage to create growth. This is how I would measure a successful scaling operation. If your team is doing too much, it burns out and it has no time, you cannot grow, you cannot keep scaling, you will not have increased cash flows. So we must mitigate this. The more time there is, the more small risks and experiments we can do with new channels, we can experiment with new products, we can create new tactics, and thus at smaller risk to the business as we can use smaller amounts of cash as we have time as leverage to create growth. Scaling balance. So it's a very difficult thing to scale. Underscaling can mean that there's too much workload on the team, meaning there's not enough time, you won't have enough leverage to be able to continue to grow. You will also miss opportunities. You may be not able to communicate with the audience in an effective way. You might not be able to jump on a trend. On the other side, we have overscaling, which is unnecessary cost, perhaps too many people within the team, maybe too many channels. And also, if we have too many different strategies, because we have too many different people in conflicting positions, we can dilute the brand voice, too many people involved. So the balance of scaling is very important. How do we find the balance? Well, I like to look at three real core identifiers, we'll say signifiers, for finding the right balance, which is efficiency, specialization, and adaptability. Efficiency is how well we execute within the process to scale. Specialization revolves around the types of roles that are in that team, and adaptability, the responsiveness to either changes or adaptation in technology or even algorithms. As an example, you might not want to run every channel, so you might want to be more efficient. You might select a certain type of content. You may not want to necessarily create loads of different types of content. Perhaps your social media objective is to answer customer responses. You may not need to create content with influencers. You may just need to create the right kind of FAQ sheets or respond to customers. This is a special case. It's a specialization of your team. And the adaptability is how that team might integrate either different strategies like tailored analytic strategies, maybe social listening to respond to customer services, and also the speed of which it can deploy. So the perfect optimization is in the middle of these three factors. And these are what I look at personally when scaling a team. Now, efficiency. We always have to be very aware when we're choosing social media channels that there are particular benefits. Some channels may have more users than others. There may be pros and cons. For example, Facebook is great for e-commerce sales. I think we all know this, but the limited organic reach is the con. If you post organically on Facebook, the likelihood is most people won't see it. Even if you have 10 million followers, you'll have a very low organic reach. Facebook is really set up for advertisements. Whereas on channels like TikTok and Instagram, we know through creating content like Reels, there is a high emphasis on creativity and trends. Okay, so if you have high engagement on these channels, TikTok and Instagram, you'll be able to reach much bigger audiences organically. Now, another trend that is really starting to kick in 2024 is volume of content. I have witnessed that there's new strategies out there where people are posting multiple times a day on channels like TikTok and Instagram, and even YouTube Shorts, to be able to reach bigger audiences. The strategy really revolves around having a piece of content go viral. But owing to this, it will impact our efficiency if we have to create higher volumes of content across multiple channels. Specialization, as alluded to earlier, we're no longer in the game of communication. It's not just about push advertising. We can use paid media strategies for that. Instead, we're in an era of value creation, which means we need to offer value to the market to be able to create our experience. So we want to deliver experience to the customer and hear their feedback and then feed that into our social media strategy. A good example being Nike here. They've obviously used a social listening tool to be able to scan for people that have used their handle and then respond, creating the value with the customer, keeping the customer retained for the future so that they don't need to do new outreach. And in fact, it's very important to do this in social media, as people will become your customers and advocate your brand on behalf of you. E-commerce is a speciality. You may have an offline store, you may have an online store. You have to create your channel to be an e-commerce savvy channel if you want to go into e-commerce. If you have an offline store, your tactics will be different. Therefore, it's important to understand what the specialization of your business is and how to create roles to match the needs of that business. An offline business that utilizes social media will have different needs to an online business that utilizes social media. Adaptability. So there's a lot of innovation within social media these days. Last week in this webinar, we covered Make.com and how to use AI automation to automate parts of your business. We have Canva, a massive revolutionary tool, sort of democratizing graphic design for everybody. CapCut, it continues to expand and get more innovative templates for TikTok, and then also AI and the utilization of AI. Now, not only are there new tools, but because of the new tools and therefore the less of a reliance for large headcounts, business models are changing. So the space is accelerating. And what we're seeing is a lot of new products and services on the market to satisfy the speed of the social media space. So some key strategies for scaling social media teams. Where do we start? So I think we should start with the customer experience and work backwards. So as I've mentioned, every business is different. So we need to know what the objective of the business is. An e-commerce store may, again, have a different set of needs to an offline store. An offline store, people might come in, you may need more customer service, you may need somebody to tell people what time the store is open. In this day and age, perhaps you don't even need a person. You could use an AI automated chatbot to deliver that information. So we have to look at what people do we need in line with the business objective, putting the customer first. So start with the customer experience, whatever your business may be, and work backwards. Size and speed. So how big do we need this project to be? Are we running multiple channels across different countries, or are we just running a local business or small business? How many channels are we going to focus on? If we're targeting Gen Z, there may be no point to use Facebook. So prioritizing channels where target audience exist and thrive is important. And then finally, budget. Budget's always a big one, but we need to make sure that we have allowance for budget, because I have seen a lot in my time. People create great content and have no media budget to utilize advertising to show people what great content they have used. And the aforementioned tools. We'll get into the in-house versus the agency later on in the slide, but just as a starting point, start with the customer experience, take note of people, speed/time, and money as a financial resource. So the business objective should feed into the social media objective, should feed into the selected channels, should feed into the channel content production, and then we should know how we are going to scale. We always want to look to grow. So in this business, we want to make sure that we always have time to be able to ensure that we can grow. So if the business objective is to make customers happier and return, increasing customer lifetime value, the social media objective has to align with this. It has to be, are we building a community? Do we just need to create awareness? Or are we focused on brand equity? It can't be everything. We should really choose our objective for time and focus in on that. If we focus on everything, we'll probably have too many points, too much to focus on, and we'll lose time within the business. And again, if we don't have time, we can't leverage the budget to create growth. The channels, they have to make sense in context of the objective. Again, where our customer audience is, what channels do they use, Gen Z versus boomer generations, what type of content is the best bang for buck to achieve said objective. Okay, so if you want brand awareness, you might find that reels with content creators are the best bang for buck. Again, going back to the customer service analogy, you might find that if people just are coming to you because you have an offline store and people want information about a product that they've bought, then perhaps you don't need to create reels. Perhaps you need to create frequently asked questions, or have AI chatbots be able to respond to the frequently asked questions for you. And then finally, scale and growth. So an example position here is that you'd have the overarching objective, your social media strategy, and then different objectives at every different channel level. Why? Because the demographic that you would reach on different channels would have different needs, maybe different requirements. Maybe they'd also understand the brand slightly differently. So I'm going to show you now, selecting Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, of how I might prioritize the channel setup to ensure that we have an efficient production. So we must have a content plan. Each channel is going to need its own content plan with a set of master content, okay, that we can utilize in various different formats and repurpose for different channels. I like to proactively plan a month ahead, but we also must know how to create spontaneous content and create a dynamic FAQ document. Once we've posted this onto the channel, we'll be able to measure whether people liked it. Maybe there's a need for more content. Maybe we can find ideas posted by our audiences so that we can co-create the value. We'll know the performance, such as how well it's engaged, how many people have seen it. And as well, we can then enhance our customer support documents to make sure that people get the adequate information they need. To make use of efficient resources, in this example where we're prioritizing Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, we can see here that YouTube might have a longer form content, okay? So this kind of 16:9, usually horizontal content, is not easily shared onto other channels. Whereas in TikTok and Instagram, we can create reels or images that can either be shared onto Facebook or TikTok, and in the TikTok case, onto Twitter or Instagram. This is how we could effectively run a more efficient process by focusing on core channels where our target audience are, and then extending that production onto channels which are not within the core focus. If we have larger needs, let's say that we're running a global marketing team over several different languages, we might want to look at how we produce this content. So the master plan might be created in English for various channels, and then translated, perhaps subtitles added to the videos, and then utilizing this technology, in this case Brandwatch Falcon, as a content management system, we can then schedule content into our different markets. To measure this over a huge global marketing system, we can utilize a social content management system and a social listening tool to create data visualization. So this is really made for massive teams here, the likes of Oppo, the likes of Alibaba. This is how I would set up the analytics ecosystem. Now, we need to have a standardized system so that we're measuring all components in the same way, such as we measure engagement in the same way, impressions in the same way. You will find that different tools will actually have different ways of measuring engagement. They might have their own formula in the back end, but we want to ensure that over the countries that we standardize this. We also want to integrate customer service. Like in the Nike example, we want to ensure that we can hear customers, what they say, both positive and negatively, and respond to them. And then also share these insights with the rest of the organization through a centralized data visualization dashboard. Future technology is AI automation. So I've talked about this before. We had a webinar last week on AI automation, but we need to get to grips with this because there's so much innovation in the space right now. Within the ecosystem of social media, it enables us to do so many different things, automate so many processes. Where we needed people to respond to customers before, AI chatbot can effectively increase the efficiency of which those are responded to, maybe by 10 times, by filtering out comments, by actually giving people information, and therefore reducing our need for headcount and increasing the amount of budget that we have left within the organization to create growth and scale. Okay, so utilizing of freelancers and agencies. I have seen this many times, but we must ensure that when we use agencies that we're not replicating in-house functions. It will be inefficient and it will just lead to a big time cost as well as monetary cost. How we should use the agencies and the freelancers is to ensure that we can continue the bandwidth, that we have a good pipeline that we can manage. If we are running a campaign and we need a pair of extra hands to manage customer service, then we can utilize freelancers. It might be, in some cases, more cost effective. As alluded to with tools, the productization of marketing services, it might be more economical than hiring full-time employees to look for the right product solution on the market to reduce the necessity to hire people for a full-time role. And then finally, on-demand expertise. If you're going to utilize some expertise that you don't have in-house, you can always look for agencies and freelancers. This might be for a short-term project, such as installing Facebook pixels, or it might be for a longer-term project, such as outsourcing creative or advertising management. Okay, so into how do we measure the effectiveness of the scalability of a social media team? So I like to use this before. We would, when we had agency clients on board, we would look at their goals. Before, we would have a big emphasis on traffic and sales. You don't need to necessarily emphasize traffic or sales anymore. I think in 2024, the resonance and growth within the community, such as creating engagement with your fans and replying to messages, actually creates awareness and traffic for your business. And this is a trend that you can see reflected in the Instagram and the TikTok algorithm. The note that I will add in here is, you don't need to look for engagement on every single channel if you cannot scale it. So if you cannot scale Facebook with organic engagement, reduce the amount of content or time that you put into curating content for Facebook, and focus on those channels that really deliver a good return on investment for you. Return on investment is hard. So how are brands measuring return on investment with social media? So I think a lot of the time people try and quantify this in numbers, though in 2024, there is a lot of emphasis on engagement. So out of this survey from Hootsuite, 69% of all respondents looked at engagement as a leading metric. I think this is a big shift in 2024 to make sure that people can see the content. Again, as showed in the previous slide, when people engage with content, generally speaking, and the way that the algorithms are set up, particularly on channels like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, more people will organically see the content if more people engage with it. And henceforth, why there is such an emphasis in 2024 on creating engagement. You want great organic engagement on your channels to scale. This is the main metric that I would use in 2024 to assess the return on investment with our social media team. Follow your audience's lead. Right, so how do we create engagement? We need to listen to the audience. We need to look at each content as it comes in one by one and assess the impact of whether the audience have engaged with it, how much view time, how much watch time. So on Instagram, on Reels, you might see the amount of plays versus replays. If you have a higher level of replays than plays as an initial post, even if it doesn't have a high level of likes as an engagement, you will see that it will be shown to more and more people, which will increase the engagement activity. So engagement is not necessarily measured in the amounts of likes and comments anymore, but also the watch time and the replays of video content. Treat social media as a long-term game. Social media really is positioned to build brand equity, but it takes time because you have to understand what the audience like. You have to understand the different kind of content pillars and what this might signify to the audience on the long term, and how these different content pillars play into building a bigger brand image that your customers can understand your brand to be, the equity of how your brand is perceived. And then finally, tell compelling stories. Make social relationships the foundation of your return on investment. I cannot emphasize enough how much I see this as an important step in 2024, that you must engage with your audience. You must create a two-way feedback and create content with your audience. Listen to what they like, find out what they like, what they don't like, and create your social media, curate it for your audience to increase your growth. The methodology of which we use in our agency is this, whereby we'll funnel people across ads and influencers to create community, and then we will utilize competitions, customer surveys, and even product surveys through even email or social media activities to enhance the community online. And through this, we'll find that we'll get active engagement in the comment section from people that have either responded. For example, let's say that the people wanted a certain type of keyboard, a certain color of keyboard in this example, and we had surveyed them to find out what their favorite colors were, and then produced this as a product. We would find that the average engagement and the active engagement for the community would uplift, increasing sales and GMV. So let's round up, because we're nearly at the end here. Just want to round up a few points. My conclusions for what creates good social media and how to measure the effectiveness of scaling and growth within social media. So we must make sure that we're properly scaling to manage increased demands for improving engagement and enhancing overall brand presence across the platforms. Again, if we don't have time to do this, we can't ensure that we're servicing the customers and the audience properly. We need to view scaling as something that's long-term, not just as an operational necessity that we just must post on social media, but a strategic investment over the long term. Digital storefronts, e-commerce, and metaverse are only just around the corner, so we must ensure that we have good brand equity to make sure that people can understand what our brand means in 2024 to compete in an ever-increasingly saturated market. And then finally, we have to be proactive in our scaling efforts. Plan for the future, read the current trends, and look at the insights so that we know what's coming around the corner. So that is all we have today. I'm going to answer a few Q&As now that I can see have built up in here. So thank you everybody for leaving your questions. Feel free to add more. Okay, so the first question here. What do you see companies doing wrong? Actually, I think a lot of the time when I see what companies are not necessarily doing right is following the basics. I see a lot of companies that really want to do everything all at once. And I think if we start with the customer experience of what is the objective of utilizing social media to satisfy our customer demands or needs, it's much easier to be able to know what to do right rather than focusing on everything. We need to know what are the right things to focus on to ensure that we have enough time and flexibility within the business to be able to scale our social media operations. Question 2, which social community platforms work best for audience and goals? I really think that depends on the type of business that you have. If you have an offline business that's small scale, perhaps a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group or a Line group, if it's in your localized locality, might be best. Gaming in the past, Discord is a big one. For crypto, Discord is also a great platform as well. But I think it really depends on the objective of the business, what would be the best platform. How can you tell if social is contributing effectively to brand and marketing? So this is always a tough one. People are always looking at customer journeys. People want to measure it quantifiably in dollar amounts. If you measure it through advertising, perhaps quantifying it with a dollar value is a good metric, especially in an e-commerce business. So you can look at your return on investment. However, if your ads team are separated from your social media teams, such as in huge corporations like Alibaba, for example, then it's much harder to understand the impact of the social media. And in my last final slides, I alluded to a lot of businesses are starting to really measure this with engagement, because strong engagement strategies can increase organic reach and impressions for content. And it also builds up an audience. The more people engage with your content, the more likely it is that they will be shown your content more frequently. So engagement would be the best way to view how effective social media strategies are in 2024. And again, this isn't necessarily just measured in likes or comments, but also in watch time, initial plays and replays with contents like YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikTok. Okay, sorry, I've just answered that one. How do we reach people in other countries if we are in China? Should we use a phone number from another country? How to run it? Okay, so right, so in China, China's a bit of a unique case. There's two ways that a Chinese business could approach this. Not only could they contact me, but in China, there are specialized agencies that have a partnership with Facebook, such as Blue Focus being one of the largest official partners of Facebook in China. Realistically, it's difficult for Chinese businesses if they don't use one of these partners. The only other solution is that they utilize an agency that isn't based in China, because in this way they can overcome having to use VPNs of bypassing the system. Facebook also has a lot of restrictions on people in China accessing back-end platforms such as Facebook Business Manager via VPN. If you access Facebook Business Manager in China via VPN too often, it can start to remove functionality from the Facebook platform for your business. So my advice here would be to either use an official Facebook partner or to partner with an agency like Live and Breathe that is not based in the locality of China. Which social platforms will be good to start with for tech companies? Okay, that's a great question. Again, tech is a bit broad, so for different audiences, you might want to utilize different channels. As in this example here, you can see that Instagram and YouTube have different kinds of positions, okay? So maybe they want to build their brand equity on Instagram, and they want to create entertaining content on YouTube. The difference between these two channels, and the reason why I'm using this as an example, is that the demographics that exist on these channels are quite different. So if we looked at the American market, we would find that YouTube is predominantly male. So if it's a tech product for men, such as a shaver for a man's beard, you might want to use YouTube. But if the product is a hairdryer, particularly aimed at women, then Instagram would be a better channel for this fit. But still, I would recommend, if you have the time and you've scaled appropriately, to test different channels with different types of content and be creative in the way in which you approach this and never stop testing. So I don't think there's necessarily like the best channels. All channels are good to test, but as a starting point, I'd really look at what are the customers needing and work backwards from the customer experience. So if it's a female product, you might want Instagram. If it's a male product, YouTube might be a better fit. Okay. Can I upload my content if I use an agency? You can upload your content if you use an agency. However, it might not necessarily be recommended. In the past, I have seen a lot of people lose functionality within their Facebook ecosystem through uploading content. A good solution for this issue is to use a content management system that is not the platform. For example, you might want to utilize a tool like, let me just show you quickly here, a tool like Brandwatch as an example, which is a content management platform to upload content, Sprout Social, Buffer, Later, Hootsuite. And this way, these might have servers in different countries like Singapore, and you can bypass uploading content onto the back of Facebook and utilize a tool to do it instead. And that way you won't suffer any VPN restrictions. So I hope that answers your question, Sandra. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. We've been on the webinar 41 minutes. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. It's been lovely seeing you here today. Please feel free to email me, get back to me, any comments, observations, improvements. Would love to hear from you. I will post this content onto YouTube as well as make the slides available. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one, which is about AI, automation, and productization of marketing ecosystems. Thank you.